As promised, deadline day is here. 35% tariffs have landed on Canada on all USMCA non-compliant goods. This included softwood lumber, steel and aluminum, and as well our dairy industry plus some other peripheral industries. Those are the three core ones. And well, people are reacting all over social media. Donald Trump talked about it yesterday. Mark Carney, actually, we don't know where Mark Carney went. He's disappeared. We haven't heard much from him. We've heard from the Premier of Ontario, and we've heard from a lot of different officials from the United States on what exactly is going on here and the expectations of the U.S. versus the expectations of Canada, which we don't know what those are yet at the moment. Here we are. Classic Canada, isn't it? We have this and so much more to get into. Welcome to the Elevate Podcast. I'm your host, Josh. I'm grateful to have you on with me once again. If you get any value from today's episode, take the time to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us to grow. Helps us to get to new audiences, which I found out has been working lately. What happens is we give people a different option than what the mainstream media offers, and we're so grateful to have you on with us. Now let's get into our first story, shall we? Bye-bye. So, August 1st is hit. 35% tariffs are landing on Canada. People are wondering, is this going to happen? Is this going to take place? We've seen a lot of false starts on deadlines since March this year in terms of tariff negotiations. And this one so far has stuck. However, this has happened in the past where tariffs have stuck on a day, they've lasted for 24 hours, and Trump takes it off and does another 90-day moratorium. He gave a 90-day moratorium to Mexico. Canada, well, we still got tariffs placed on us on all non-compliant USMCA goods. There are some people in Canada who are very upset by this, very confused. Many are on the left-wing persuasion, saying, you know what? This sucks. Trump sucks. I hate Trump. I hate America. Don't go to America. We're just going to diversify. It's all good. Canada will be fine. These people are not serious people. These people don't understand how trade works. They really, quite frankly, don't know how economics works. And honestly, I don't have an economics degree, but I know more than these people because I take the time to research, read, and comprehend what is happening around us. I don't know it to an expert level, but I know enough to see what the reality is. And right now, the reality is bleak because our leaders have gone silent. I'll show you what I mean. Yesterday, Mr. Donald Trump was doing a whole MAHA press conference, Make America Healthy Again. He had RFK Jr. there beside him talking about reinstating the president's fitness test. That's why you have a lot of familiar faces up there if you know sports. You have Triple H, Paul Levesque from WWE. You have Bryson DeChambeau, who's just behind Trump there. Then you also have, you can't really see it in this still, but you have Harrison Butker, who's the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs, standing behind RFK Jr. DeChambeau is a golfer. And then you have a few more White House officials around Donald Trump, Howard Lutnik, Vice President J.D. Vance, and so on. This is a separate announcement for Trump at this time. However, reporters didn't waste their time to ask him about what's going on with Canada. And well, this was his response.
The Palestinian state, is that a deal breaker?
Well, we're going to see. No, I didn't like what they said, but that's their opinion. I didn't like that. Not a deal breaker, but we haven't spoken to Canada today. He's called, and we'll see. But we have made a few deals today that are excellent deals for the country. Yeah. Do you have a
Canada currently? What's the holdup with the negotiations with Canada?
Well, they have to pay a fair rate. That's all. It's very simple. They have been charging very, very high tariffs to our farmers, some over 200%. And they've been treating our farmers very badly. They've been treating our country very badly for years. And look, we like Canada. I love Canada. I have so many friends in Canada. But they've been very poorly led. They've been very, very poorly led. And all we want is fairness for our country. That's all. They want to be under the, as we call it, the Golden Dome. And I said, well, you're going to have to pay for that. They want a lot of things from our country, and for years we did it. We basically protect them with our military. They spend very little money on their military, as you know, not an acceptable amount of money.
So I'll hit the humor side of this clip. First one being the fact that they're talking foreign policy, talking about doing deals with different countries, talking about what's going on with Canada, and them talking about Palestinian statehood, this, that, the other. And as he's having this conversation, he's having members of the entertainment and sporting class behind him trying to act like they know what he's talking about, trying to act like, yeah. Also trying not to break. You can see Triple H, Bryson DeChambeau. You can't really see Harrison Butker here, but you can just see there's such, all right, just can't crack, can't do a face, because then I'll be all over social media. And so they're just trying to be, I'm just here for sports, guys. I'm just here for sports. It was a wild time. But that was the humor side of it for me. But getting into what we're talking about today, Palestinian statehood was, they said, not a deal breaker, but it wasn't helpful. Mark Carney doing what he was doing today, again, making announcements that haven't really been helpful to Canadians, has been an odd choice. Announcing a dropping of bridge tolls on the PEI bridge, and as well as the ferries getting to the Prince Edward Island, was a choice when you advertised it as a Canadian affordability announcement. And it really was only an affordability announcement for one province and the ones that are surrounding. So that was interesting. Then to get up for another announcement the day before this August 1st deadline, saying, we're going to recognize Palestinian statehood. Okay. When your major trading partner sees things differently and is going about it differently, you then jump in and do that. Seems like an odd choice to make. And allegedly, as Trump said here, that Mark Carney did call, or at least a representative from Canada called, and he said, I'll get to them later. If this is true, this looks very bad on Canada. It looks very bad on Mark Carney, showing that he's completely lost control of negotiations and the talks of trade with the United States. We talked about this earlier this week when news broke that Mark Carney's team had been reaching out to Stephen Harper, former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, to get advice on how to deal with negotiations with Mr. Donald Trump, the man who said he is the crisis negotiator. He has all the answers. He's the guy who can steer us through all this, is calling the big bad Stephen Harper for help. This has been all created by the Liberal Party of Canada. This has all been created by Mark Carney. This is tough. And as I said earlier, we haven't heard anything from Mark Carney yet, but we have heard from Premier Doug Ford. Slight update. We actually did get a response from Mark Carney, not from a video press conference, no, but he did give a statement at midnight Eastern time about these tariffs, and this is exactly what he had to say. President Trump has announced that the United States will increase its tariffs to 35% on those Canadian exports that are not covered under the Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement, or CUSMA, well, he'd like to say. While the Canadian government is disappointed by this action, we remain committed to CUSMA, which is the second largest free trade agreement by trading volume. The U.S. application of CUSMA means that the U.S. average tariff rate on Canadian goods remains one of its lowest for all its trading partners. Other sectors of our economy, including lumber, steel, aluminum, and automobiles, are, however, heavily impacted by U.S. duties and tariffs. For such sectors, the Canadian government will act to protect these Canadian jobs and invest in our industrial competitiveness, buy Canadian, and diversify our export markets. The United States has justified its most recent trade action on the basis of the cross-border flow of fentanyl, despite the fact that Canada accounts for 1% of U.S. fentanyl imports and has been working intensively to further reduce these volumes. Canada's government is making historic investments in border security to arrest drug traffickers, take down transnational gangs, and end migrant smuggling. These include thousands of new law enforcement and border security officers, aerial surveillance, intelligence, and security operations, and the largest, strongest border legislation in our history. We will continue working with the United States to stop the scourge of fentanyl and save lives in both our countries. While we continue to negotiate with the U.S. on our trading relationship, the Canadian government is laser focused on what we can control, building Canada strong. The federal government, provinces, and territories are working together to cut down trade barriers to build one Canadian economy. We are developing a series of major nation-building projects with provincial, territorial, and Indigenous partners. Together, these initiatives have the potential to catalyze over $500 billion of new investments in Canada. Yada, yada, yada. We've heard this all before. Then none of this is a surprise. These are all the basic talking points we've heard from Mark Carney at this point. The part that is really interesting is how he tries to downplay the impact of these tariffs. Well, if you average it across the board with the USMCA goods that are tariff-free, we still have the lowest tariff rate in the world. Yeah, but we're getting hammered on some of our core industries, and your response to that is going to be give them all money, because that's really the only option you have, because we do not have export capacity. We're lacking demand from countries to make up for the demand from the U.S., and we're at the point now where companies are asking the Canadian government to buy equity in their companies to help them get through this time. But yeah, keep acting like it's no big deal. that we still have the lowest tariff rate in the world because when it averages out, it's not a big deal. Some of our major sectors, mainly in Ontario, are about to get hit really hard. And you are sitting there watching it all happen. And then that second last paragraph where he talks about we're going to build one big Canadian economy. We are going to buy our own stuff. We're going to diversify, yada, yada, yada. However, you passed a bill that is, it was weak at best. And then you went on summer vacation. I go back to my point from earlier. It doesn't matter what you have to say. These words are incredibly empty, incredibly hollow, and just as hollow as your stupid elbows up campaign that you used government money for to fund the Liberal Party's focus groups to figure out what Canadians were feeling so you could run on those fears. Didn't forget about that. So yes, it's great to have a statement. Same old talking points. These people in these industries are facing some real hardship, and this is all we're getting. Don't worry, we'll take care of you. Get ready. Inflation is about to go through the roof, baby. If a deal gets signed within the next month, I will happily come back on here and eat crow. But Mark Carney is showing no behavior, no signs that he's actively working to get a deal done. All signs show that these talks are stalled, and Mark Carney is stalling to gain time in the media. And that's what you've been getting. But now let's check in with what Doug Ford had to say.
Folks, we all know this is a serious time for our province and our country. With President Trump taking direct aim at our economy, his goal is to take every single business out of our country, out of our province, and bring it down to the U.S. But I'll tell you, I will fight like I've never fought before, and we're going to continue fighting against President Trump and his radical views. I better stop there because I'll get on a rant. And I'll just tell you, our government is doing everything in its power to cut red tape and make Ontario and Canada the strongest economy in the G7. Our government has a plan to protect Ontario. And I always say our job is not only protect Ontario, but protect communities, protect families, protect jobs and businesses. And that's exactly what we're going to do. And I will not spare a penny to make sure we do it.
So there you have it. If you are living in Ontario, you should be very concerned hearing that. Very concerned. First, he reiterates Liberal talking points. We're going to be the strongest economy in the G7. Okay, heard that before from Mark Carney. Weird to hear the quote-unquote conservative premier talk about that and reiterate those talking points. And two, he says, we're going to work as hard as we can to protect jobs, make sure people don't lose their jobs. Well, how do you do that? Well, you work with the federal government to try and get subsidy and relief sent to these companies so that they don't have to lay off anybody. That's how that's going to work. So that's what he means when he says that. And three, he says, I'm not going to spare any penny to make sure that we protect everybody. My friends, it looks like a lot of money printing is coming down the pipe because we're making a fraction of what we could be making off our resources. Right now, we are taxing our people to oblivion. What more can give? What more is going to happen? Doug Ford has been talking a lot of tough talk, and now's the time to start acting it. It's a lot of fun playing political games trying to get Pierre Poilievre's job as the leader of the Federal Conservative Party. But when the rubber meets the road, where are you going to stand? It seems like you're going to put your province in the exact same spot you did during COVID. You're going to put people in debt, drive up inflation, and work with the federal government to do just that. Mark Carney is the greatest guy that we can have at the helm right now, he says. Is he? Quite frankly, tariffs just got laid on some heavy industries in our country, and we still haven't heard from Mark Carney. We've heard about Palestinian statehood. We've heard about PEI bridge tolls, but haven't heard a dang thing about these tariffs and how those negotiations are going. We've heard from Stephen Harper, but haven't heard a dang thing from Mark Carney. Whenever he's asked about these things during press conferences, he just kind of glosses over them and hopes no one asks anymore. Because I'm Mark Carney. I'm only going to agree to a deal that makes sense for us. Well, that's BS talk for we don't got jack. But Liberal followers are eating that up, thinking, yeah, that's why I trust Mark Carney. If it's a bad deal for Canada, we're not getting anything, and that's okay. We'll just suffer under 35% tariffs. Sounds like a great plan, y'all. Sounds like a great plan. Because Mr. Doug Ford expands on this idea in an X post. He says, Canada shouldn't settle for anything less than the right deal. Now is not the time to roll over. We need to stand our ground. The increase in U.S. tariffs to 35% is concerning, especially with tariffs still in place on steel, aluminum, autos, forestry, and now copper. While Canada continues to benefit from zero tariffs on all trade that's USMCA compliant, representing over 90% of our American exports, we need to do everything in our power to protect workers, businesses, and communities from the impact of tariffs. The federal government needs to hit back with a 50% tariff on U.S. steel and aluminum. Canada has what the United States needs: oil and gas, critical minerals, steel and aluminum, electricity, potash, and uranium. We're America's #1 customer and keep millions of Americans working. The federal government needs to maximize our leverage and stand strong in the face of President Trump's tariffs. Our government will do whatever it is needed to support workers and businesses. We're building a more competitive, self-reliant, and resilient economy by speeding up approvals, building new infrastructure to diversify our trading partners, and onshoring every widget we can to fortify homegrown supply chains. Canadian workers and businesses are desperate for certainty. Let's work together, united, to deliver it. And that all looks like a quote that he got copy and pasted from Mark Carney's office. We need to hit back at them with more tariffs. Why is that the reaction? Why is that the answer? Especially for an economy like ours, tariffs on our #1 trading partner is a very, very bad idea. Let's just throw more gasoline on ourselves and light ourselves on fire. That's what this does. That's the visual of what this does to our country. Why is that the reaction? Why the stupid, consistent, ridiculous mantra of elbows up, essentially, is what Doug Ford's saying here? It makes zero sense. Quite frankly, Howard Lutnik, the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, had this to say on Fox News about this whole ordeal.
But Canada, I take it, not so much or not so good.
Well, imagine like the president truthed out that the Canadians put out, oh, we're going to recognize the Palestinian state. I mean, come on, don't be so tone deaf, right? The president is totally into trying to get peace in Gaza, and you're throwing your hat in the ring from Canada? Come on. You know, they still haven't solved dairy. They still have 2 countries on the whole world retaliated against the United States of America tariffs. China, which we all know, and Canada. So, you know what? I just don't see the president stepping off the gas. Now, Mark Carney came down, had a really nice lunch with the president when he first got elected. You know, if he makes that call and if he starts turning on the charm and if he takes off his retaliation, and stops the silliness, maybe the president will let it down a bit. But right now, 35%, that letter he sent, is surely in the cards.
So you got it there. That's how the U.S. views the retaliation from Canada. He names 2 countries that have retaliated: China and Canada. It's funny because China can get away with some retaliation because they are one of the world's largest economies. So they can get away with a little bit of retaliation against the United States. Like, that's 2 big economic superpowers going at it. That makes sense. Canada, well, yeah, we're a fraction of that size. We can't afford to get into a tariff war with the United States. No matter how much our media likes to gaslight us and tell us that we cannot. You tell the workers in the steel industry right now that we can do that. You tell the workers in softwood lumber and forestry that they can do that. You even tell the workers in the dairy industry that they can go ahead and do that. And we'll see how that all goes. Quite frankly, it sucks. It's been a tough go. Yeah, if you remember back in November early of last year, Melanie Jolie was bragging about the idea that we were retaliating and that everyone was coming to us for advice.
If there's a country in the world that understands the U.S., it's Canada. And so that's why there's so many delegations, so many countries that are coming to see us, to ask us about the new administration, to ask us about how we and they can adapt. And so I think that Canada's influence is actually increasing because of the impacts that the world is now facing with the new administration. So we will continue to engage, and we will continue, of course, to engage with the U.S., but we will increase also our engagements across the world.
So that was early on. And if you remember throughout, Melanie Jolie was bragging about the fact that we are one of 2 countries that were retaliating against the United States with tariffs. And everyone is coming to us for advice, as she alluded to here. Well, it's funny because it seems like every other country is getting a deal except for us. Either we are the biggest geniuses ever, or we're getting absolutely cooked. The problem is we just don't fully know because there's zero transparency in this administration. They continue to hide behind the mantra of we don't negotiate in public. However, we're getting more feedback from the American administration of how negotiations are going than we are getting from our own administration. So who knows? Maybe the Americans are lying straight through their teeth. We won't know because we don't get a counter narrative from Canada. We get a counter narrative from maybe CBC and the CTVs of the world, but nowhere else. Not the actual prime minister. We just get, no, trust me, it's all good. It's disheartening to see. It is wild to watch. We'll see where this all goes. I go back to a post I made last night. I said, I keep hearing that this is the fight of our lives, which confuses me. Because if that were true, Carney and the Liberals wouldn't be on summer vacation right now. The reality is 97% of Carney's investments are in the US. Why would he be in a rush to work for Canadian interests? Seems to me it's great for business to scare off the majority of private investment in Canada so that the likes of Brookfield can pick up the pieces. Could I be wrong? Maybe. But we'll see. And I stick to this. How can you possibly trust a guy who has so much interest and so much financial interest in things that are outside our country? If he was wearing the blue jersey, the media would be killing him right now. Yet the media tried to convince Canadians, and they did convince Canadians, that the guy who's been here his whole life, working his way up the political ladder, was a worse option than a guy who has not been in the country, been working for a bunch of multinational companies through his time, served as the governor of the Bank of England, governor of the Bank of Canada. We haven't really seen him in Canada for a long, long time. He's got multiple passports. His family lives in New York City, and we're to believe that he was the right guy to fight for Canadian interests. I'm a guy who doesn't really believe in words. I care about actions. And his actions have dictated that he doesn't care about Canada. That Canada is actually a worse place to visit. Canada is a worse place to live. And he shows that and has displayed that through his actions. So you're expecting me to believe that the negotiations are going well on Canada's behalf right now? Not for a second do I believe that. This guy couldn't care less about Canada. Couldn't care less about us. This was all a ploy, from my perspective, to get more money. And now he's in a position of authority where he can enrich himself further and get his buddies rich in the process. We've seen it happen. We've connected the dots before the election even happened, and people still chose not to believe it. They wanted to believe that Carney was the guy in a crisis. And Pierre Poilievre was just too far right wing. That might just show you how far left this country has really gone. But anyways, enjoy your day. Have yourselves a good one. I'm out.